Chapter 5. Fifth Night, P.M. Fifth Night, T. She'd been infected in or near the walled city. Had to have been. Something big and terrible had happened there, and her infection had either been an important part of it, or a peripheral side event, but it was connected. And regardless if that connection was a thick web of important happenings, or a wispy umbilical cord to a tiny afterbirth, it was there. And finding out what had happened in the walled city would also reveal how and why she'd gotten infected. Perhaps it would even explain why Tsang wanted her, a loyal, if slightly lazy security guard, dead so badly they sent the bribe alternative to kill her. All this and more she pondered, sitting up in her shelter, loosely hugging her knees. She climbed down a sewer and found an abandoned maintenance office to hole up in. It was a pretty nice spot, all things considered. No vermin, not too filthy, and given the surroundings, an acceptable smell. She remembered the outrage that had ensued at the sacking of almost half of the sewer maintenance workers and the shutting down of an equal portion of the workstations, about a year ago. That's why this office was in such a decent state. It had only been abandoned for a year or so. The cabinets still held folded plans of the sewer system, binders with instructions, and even an old plastic potted planton. You'd have to remember this spot. It made for a good sleeping spot on a long-term basis. And the fact that it had been unlocked for a year without being disturbed meant she was pretty safe for a while still. Hell, she could even redecorate the place a bit. Get the lighting working again, stuff like that. Shame it didn't have a shower, but couldn't have it all. Of course, she was hoping to be out of Hong Kong and clear of Tsang within a short time frame. She could use the shower, probably didn't smell all that fresh, especially after spending some time in a cellar full of stinky ghouls. She felt guilty thinking of them like that, but really, it was the truth. Anyway, to the order of the day. A place called Hue, ship called the Bolt Holum. She'd heard of Hue. It was more a floating shanty town of houseboats. A bit of a walk, but she figured the heat would be a bit less after 4 days, so it'd be a pleasant stroll. The feeling was there again of her body being a bit distant somehow. It was highly disconcerting, especially now she knew that it was her soul or her mind or whatever slowly letting go of her body. Not recognizing it anymore. She'd have to feed and pick her targets, as Laoshi had asked. But it was a bit of a conundrum, wasn't it? At first sight, it would be logical to feed on bad people, since, well, better condemn a bad person than a good one. But if you thought about it a bit more closely, it wasn't that simple. Because infecting someone made them a carrier and a vector as well. And bad people would feed indiscriminately, not caring who they infected, in turn hurting many more people. But what then? Feed on good folks? The ones who didn't deserve it in the first place? That wasn't fair either. This whole be careful whom you infect shtick was nice on paper, but in reality. Perhaps the chance would present itself, to feed on someone without harming the world. Time to start her day. Fretting wouldn't do any good. She exited the office, endured the stink until she came to the ladder and climbed back to the surface, setting off for Hue. Her walk took her past the less well-off parts of Hong Kong, all a far cry from Nathan Road and the skyscrapers that counted Tsang Sek HQ among them. The streets were more narrow, less clean, and less well-lit. It was comparable to the neighborhood Nuojin and his group of unfortunate would-be runners had lived in, except that the houses were less squalid. But the streets felt more dangerous to compensate. She was bothered a few times by homeless people asking for change or food, but she needed the former and had no more use for the latter. So she just turned up her proverbial collar and ignored them. She emerged from an alleyway to find herself in Hue. It looked every bit as run-down as the rest of the district, but here the owners of the small shops and stalls had installed neon lighting absolutely everywhere. Kate didn't think it was an improvement. At least without lighting the squalor could still hide in the dark, ashamed of itself. Here it was, exposed and naked, simultaneously laying itself bare and cowering in shame under the eye of all the people cursing it for being their home.
Hey.
A diminutive man tried to catch her attention.
Sunglasses at night. You look like you like your tech.
When Kate gave the pudgy kid with the dark blue beanie a look, she had to wonder if his balls had already dropped. He couldn't have been more than 16, wearing a bright but cheap-looking luminous blue visor over his eyes. He was holding a cyberdeck to his chest, and one of his hands was wrapped in a synth-rubber glove, studded with buttons. Kate knew the thing.
Heh.
She pointed out with a chuckle.
That's some nostalgia gear right there. I love the power glove.
The kid beamed.
It's so bad. Now, can I interest you in some tech?
Nope. He couldn't.
Nope. You can't.
On the other hand, he could dramatically shorten the time she'd spend looking for that bolt hole place. It's just take a small white lie.
But hey, tell you what, you let me know where I can find a certain boat, ship, and I'll be sure to mention your name to my Decker friends.
The kid blew, taking care not to look impressed.
Every Decker knows maximum law, babe.
Oh, that was a dead giveaway. Promises of increased commerce wouldn't help, but something else would win. Pushing her boobs slightly forward, she tried again.
Oh, you're maximum law. Wow, never thought I'd meet you in person.
She had no idea who the fuck this kid was.
That's me, babe. My time's valuable, but tell you what, 'cause I'm in a good mood, I'll help you out for free. How's that?
Ha, feminine forms always worked on hormone-crazed teenagers, especially the ones like this guy. Probably never even seen a girl up close.
Thanks, I'm really appreciative.
It was a petty manipulative thing to do, but it wasn't like there were any victims to her little bit of femme fatale theater. All she'd steal from him were a few breaths to explain where the damn ship was. And for the one time she actually managed to pull it off, she might as well use and enjoy it.
Bolt hole's anchored at the northern docks, a ways over there.
He pointed between the houseboats to a long jetty. At the end, vaguely, she could see the shape of a ship sticking up above the bobbing roofs.
Oh, rear yacht. Thanks, kid. Yo, that's maximum law, or max to you. By the way, there's not much you can do there.
This might be useful, even though it might be very bad news.
Oh, why is that?
He plunked the cyberdeck down on a crate and began screwing it open.
Because the people who live there are gone now. Gonna leave HK pretty soon.
He looked up, trying to conceal his pride beneath a face of arrogant confidence.
There's some serious caliber runners. Customers of mine, too.
He turned back to the deck.
Of course they are.
Aw, shit. She'd been hoping to get all the information she needed tonight, instead of being sent on a wild goose chase. Now these people, whoever the fuck they were gone, and if this kid didn't know where, she'd have nothing to go on.
So, any idea where I can find them?
He looked up at her.
You a cop or something?
She tesked.
Come on, Max, do I look like a cop? I just want to ask them some questions. It's about something that happened to me, and I just need to know. Nothing to do with the law.
She added with a kindred smirk.
Well, except that you're the law here.
He gave a short chuckle, but then shook his head, back to fiddling with his cyberdeck, his tongue sticking out the side of his mouth.
Maximum law is discreet, babe. I don't just tell anyone.
Yeah, like you were discreet when you said they were runners. Like you didn't just tell anyone that they were gone. Some prodding would get her the information she needed, because he clearly knew something, and loved showing it.
Come on, Max,
she insisted, leaning over his shoulder, supposedly examining the cyberdeck, but simply using it as an excuse for her boob to touch his shoulder.
You can trust me?
Yeah, it was dirty and morally questionable, but she really needed this information, and it wasn't like she was actually seducing him. She wasn't certain enough of his age to even contemplate that. She was just being nice, and it had more than a bit of effect. The guy sighed and said,
Look, all I can tell you is that they worked for Kindly Chang. If anyone knows where they are, it's her.
All right, that was a lead.
And of course the law knows where I can find this Kindly Chang, right?
He shrugged, then pointed his screwdriver in the opposite direction of the ship.
Mahjong parlor. That ain't no secret. But,
he remarked, tapping his lower lip with the tip of his screwdriver.
Just letting you know, Kindly Chang and her guys don't mess around. Neither do I,
Kate said, self-assured. She'd survived more than just some petty black marketer in these last few nights.
I'm serious, babe. Kindly Chang isn't some dumbass Blue Lantern, if you get my drift.
That term made her rethink her own confidence. This meant this Kindly Chang character was at the very least a member of the Triad, and not some Blue Lantern meaning someone with clout, and clout meant entourage. Any hope of getting information through any other means than negotiating or, at worst, kowtowing could go right out the window. Still, it had to be done, and Triad or no, the worst that could happen was that the woman simply refused to deal with her. That was one advantage Triad bosses had over petty criminals. They could see the long term, and they knew that harming people on a whim was terrible for business. She could expect courteousness as long as she didn't start provoking people, which she had no intention of doing anyway. She was all about everybody getting along.
Yeah, well, I just gotta ask her some questions. Your funeral, babe.
Now he was just exaggerating. It was clear which mahjong parlor it was. Apart from the fact that there was only one, it couldn't have been more obvious. People with tattoos stood looking inconspicuous around it. A man in a troll talking and smoking a cigarette, their eyes shifting back and forth. A woman leaning against the wall, one hand behind her back, under her jacket. An orc walking up and down the jetty, a suspicious bulge under his pullover. They could have just as well worn signs. Still, it wasn't her problem. She came in peace. The eyes followed her from the jetty to the door, but no one showed any intent of stopping her. Smoke hung in the mahjong parlor, but the number of tile games being played was predictably far less than the place's name made suspect. There were exactly 2 mahjong tables, of which one was not being used. The other had a young woman, an orc, and 2 elves occupying it, their concentration on the game immediately shifting to the new arrival. This was an audience chamber more than anything, a place where business was conducted, but only between 2 parties. And one of the parties was clearly the middle-aged woman with dark gray robes, sitting imperiously at an arm's chair behind a desk of polished mahogany. The cigarette she held in its holder, upper length of course, was pointed haughtily upward, held loosely between 2 fingers. Her nose pointed the same way as her cigarette. A man standing behind her, over 2 meters tall and half sibbered up, crossed his arms just so he had an excuse to let his muscles ripple. The tone was set, and then some mun.
The last white girl to step into my parlor brought me good luck,
the woman said in a raspy, tobacco-worn voice.
And life teaches us that there is balance in all things.
She took a drag from her cigarette.
That makes your prospects very dubious. Start talking.
Oh my. Was she always this welcoming?
I'm just here for information,
Kate said, trying not to look too uncomfortable.
There are some people I really need to talk to, and I was told you could help me find them.
The woman shrugged, blowing out smoke.
I can find anyone, if the price is right, and if I'm inclined to do so. I'm sure we can negotiate a fair price. As for inclination, well, I don't think there's any harm in helping me meet some people. Like I said, I just need to ask them a few things.
The triad woman leaned forward in her chair, wrinkling her nose.
The smell of pork wafts off you, girl. I don't deal with cops or 25s. I'm not a cop,
she said quickly.
Or a snitch, or an informant. Just a stupid wage slave.
She reclined in her chair, her nose pointing even higher.
We'll see. Now please, humor me. Tell me who you want found and what you're willing to pay for it.
Kate took a deep breath, all eyes still on her, and said,
I was told to find some people for a personal matter. There are no personal matters when I'm involved, dear.
It was the first time Kate had heard the word dear being used as an insult.
Why?
She'd have to stand up for herself if she was to gain any respect in this place.
I thought you people appreciated discretion? Well, this is something I want to be discreet at.
Triad leaders would tear you apart if you acquiesced to every demand. The woman only gave a short, lopsided chuckle.
Who?
She didn't press the issue, so that was a good thing, Kate figured.
The, people who lived on the bolt hole until recently.
A poker face, if ever there was one. Though what it hid, Kate didn't know.
I see. And our payment for services rendered if we indeed deign to render the service, that is.
Kate fished the cred stick out of her pocket, taking care to only use slow movements. She didn't want the cybered-up muscle mountain to tackle her to the ground. He looked like he could break bones with nothing but a stern look.
There's over 16,000 on this cred stick. 6,000 is a more than fair price for a small bit of information.
The woman motioned for the enforcer to take the cred stick.
I have to warn you, though,
Kate said quickly as the muscleman snatched the stick from her fingers.
Better to insert it on a closed circuit first and desin it. It's Ucha. A bit hot. Desinning costs 1,000 extra.
The woman informed her flatly. Of course it did.
I'd like to ask, though. These are my life savings.
She'd have to be a bit open-hearted to make sure these people didn't fleece her. And try or no, surely these people had heart somewhere way down in their pits of stone, brambles, and ichor.
I'd hoped to be able to use it for my own place somewhere, but, well, please.
The woman grunted, waving her words away as if they were foul-smelling smoke.
Beareth the sentimental babbling.
The huge Cyberman slid the cred stick out of the portable terminal he'd been handed by an underling.
Speaks the truth on both counts,
he rumbled.
Nguyen's there, and cred stick is Nova hot.
He held out the terminal so the gray-robed woman could read the screen. Silence fell. As Kate's tongue played around the fangs behind her lips, without her even being aware, the woman slowly rose.
I'll tell you exactly what your money buys you in a minute. First, there are some things I'd very much like to.
She came around against her desk and leaned against it.
Impress upon you. Strangler Bow, if you please.
Holy hell, this man was called Strangler Bow, of all things, and it wouldn't be a name he'd gotten for his charming personality. The huge man motioned for two underlings to fetch something. They quickly disappeared in a side room, Kate's eyes involuntarily following them.
I'm talking to you, dear,
the Triad woman snapped.
Don't look at them. Look at me. Sorry, I said I was talking to you. When I talk, you listen.
She took the hint and shut up. The two underlings reappeared and scuttled behind her. Her heart began pounding and her breath sped up when she heard the plastic being laid out behind her. The sports bag lay on the ground, out of reach. Oh God, no.
Whoa, hey, come on, you don't have to. Stop whining. I only want to give you a gift or two.
Whatever the gift was, if it involved covering the floor with a big sheet of plastic, it was something terrible. The next moment, the Triad woman made her leg lash out hard.
This is for being part of Tang Corporation.
The kick struck Kate so hard and unexpected between the legs that she was briefly lifted up to the tips of her toes. The pain was immense, the soft, sensitive tissues squashed and wrenched by the impact. Her legs were powerless and refused to hold her up, sending her buckling to the ground on her knees, her hands reflexively pressed against her groin. She fell forward, and one of her hands was only just in time to brace her, the other remaining where it was.
Oh.
She heard the woman at the mahjong table jeer.
Right in the baby dispenser.
She sat there on her knees and hand, her face drawn into a pained grimacing. Her genitals felt numb and pounding with pain at the same time. Oh God, she was going to die here. This bitch was going to kick the shit out of her and then shoot her like a dog. The plastic tarp said enough. When she raised her head, she did it just in time to see the heavy candlestick come down.
And this is for bringing your disgusting disease in here.
She only heard a clunk, but felt nothing, at least at first. When her head hit the plastic, the pain began pounding in the side of her face, and she felt the tickling of blood running from her cheek, over her nose to the other cheek. She opened her eyes to see red drops pattering on the plastic. It didn't matter anymore. It was all foreplay to her brains being blown out.
And this is for asking me to snitch on my associates.
A hard kick struck her in the ribs, knocking her over, sending her falling onto her side. She didn't know if any ribs were broken, but they hurt immensely. Not that it mattered.
Oh, and for wearing sunglasses at night, here's a little extra.
The tip of the woman's shoe smacked into her abdomen, knocking the wind from her.
Yeah.
The girl at the mahjong table cheered.
Kick the shit out of her, Auntie.
The triad woman kneeled by Kate, imparting in venomous friendliness.
Now, let me tell you what your money buys you. First, your life. Second, the clothes on your back.
Kate could only sputter and cough. Between her legs, on the side of her face, and on the left side of her rib cage, pain hammered away at her.
So what you're going to do now is crawl out of here like the little court bitch you are, and never show your ghost face ever again.
She brought her mouth even closer to Kate's ear.
If you do, I'm making a necklace out of your teeth. Or, well, Strangler Bow will, once my promotion to 438 is finalized. Is that clear?
Shame and humiliation burning in her heart, Kate could do nothing else than nod. The woman rose.
Strangler Bow, I have a feeling Miss Chang Humpert isn't quite capable of leaving the premises at the tempo I would like her to. If you please, rid my parlor of this cadaver.
Without any ceremony, the huge enforcer grabbed Kate by the hood of her sweater and hauled her outside, dumping her on the wood of the jetty.
I've got no beef with you,
he offered as parting words.
But you'd better not come back here, or you're dead.
She heard the door slam behind her. It opened again, and her sports bag was thrown against her ass, the weight of the SMG gone from it.
Here's your rags.
The door closed again. Her money, her dignity, her hopes of finding answers, all gone. She didn't care about the flunkies watching her, lying on the ground, bleeding and beaten, didn't care how much they enjoyed the sight. She just lay there on the jetty, capable of nothing more than holding back the tears. She'd lost it all. And for what? Why had this woman suddenly decided to beat her to a pulp? The whole transaction was going all right until the name Tang had appeared on the screen. What was she going to do now? All that was left was pick herself up off the ground, heal the bleeding wound on her cheek, and catch her breath, then find someone to sink her fangs into, and finally just to disappear forever. Where would she go? She wasn't sinless. She couldn't travel or do anything without money. The soft tissues between her legs pounded with agony, but the humiliation had been worse than any physical pain. She'd really hit rock bottom this time. How had it ever come to this?
Well, you must be the luckiest person I've seen all year.
She opened her eyes to see Boots standing in front of her. A quick scan of the surroundings told her it wasn't one of the mooks standing guard. They were all still there, sneering at her, she could tell even through the blur of her tears. Perhaps it was just an asshole gloating, but he didn't sound like it. She looked up, ignoring the pain in her ribs as her neck craned, and asked,
How do you figure that? Well,
the man standing over her said, kneeling down,
You obviously displeased kindly Chang, and yet you're still alive.
She let out a choked laugh.
Thank heaven for small favors, I suppose.
He was an orc, but markedly handsome, his face confident, rugged, and authoritarian, and yet his eyes showed a softer, gentler side. His head was shaved on the sides, and short on top, and a short military mohawk.
Come on.
He held out his hand.
I have no idea what you've done to get so worked over. But let me look at that wound in your face, at least. It's pretty nasty.
She might as well. Putting her hand into his, she was hoisted up to her feet with remarkable ease. When she saw his arms, she realized why. The orc was pure muscle. Not a hulking giant like this Strangler Bow character, but clearly a rigorously trained and powerful person. A soldier or a cop. Oryx, at least.
Jeez,
he grunted, setting his hands against her face and looking at the wound with a pained face.
This needs stitches. Don't worry, I've got some time to suture this. Even then, it'll be a nasty scar.
He held up his PDA to her face, and on the screen, Kate could see a ghastly, almond-shaped stretch of open skin that went from her nostril to just below her eye. The skin simply split apart from the impact. It made her wince, but still, Kate figured it'd heal much better than this guy thought. The human meta-human vampiric virus cared a great deal about its host, in its own twisted ways.
I can't pay you for this. Bitch took all my money. Just so you know.
She didn't feel like being in debt, especially not in this place. Her heart ached again at the loss of her entire life savings, but there was no way to get it back that didn't involve suicide.
Oh, that's all right. It's just a bit of thread.
His eyes narrowed, as if he was trying to remember something.
You look familiar. Haven't I seen you somewhere before?
Oh, please. She appreciated the guy's offer for help, but she really didn't feel like flirting, no matter how much of a dreamboat he was. She caught herself rolling her eyes.
Look, thanks for the concern, but I'm really not in the mood to be hit on. You're going to end up asking me to dinner, aren't you?
Flatly, the orc just said.
You're barking up the wrong tree, miss.
He kept looking at the wound and produced a small suture kit. Kate had no idea what the remark meant, but her embarrassment only grew as she realized she'd been a bit overconfident and got shot down once again.
Now hold still. This'll sting like hell.
He wasn't wrong. She winced with every stab of the needle, the hypersensitive nerves in her cheek shrieking in pain from the tiny needle.
Hold still.
Easy for him to say. Still, she couldn't appear like a wimp now. There had been more than enough of that already.
So,
he said, concentrated in the suturing.
What on earth did you do to piss off kindly Cheng so badly? Man.
She sighed.
Hell if I know. I just wanted some information. Was prepared to pay for it too. Everything went well until she discovered.
She stopped herself. Maybe this guy would have the same response the ganger bitch had shown. The name, Song, didn't seem to be well loved around these parts.
Discovered what?
He snapped the string and tied it into place.
There, you're good. Discovered what?
Fuck it, what did it matter? This orc clearly wasn't of the same rotten moral caliber the rice-eating triad bitch had been. Hopefully.
That I used to work for Tang.
He only went.
Oh. I see. Yeah. Mia, that sure can be conversation killer when dealing with kindly Cheng. What was your job?
Might as well tell the truth.
Security officer. Just some wage slave trying to keep people safe and earn an honest living. I was never involved with any of the shady shit they apparently did. I just joined up to protect the working man. Aha. You said used to. They want me dead now. Ah.
He chuckled.
You'd think kindly Cheng would see that as a reason to see you as her best buddy.
He put a hand on her shoulder.
Well, that's your injury taken care of. You hurt anywhere else?
Her ribs hurt, and so did her baby dispenser, but she wasn't letting anyone near that.
No, I'm good, thanks.
The suture set the skin on her face taut, even pulled at the corner of her mouth.
All right,
he said with a curt nod. Then he jabbed his thumb at the mahjong parlor behind him.
I'm going to pick up something in there, but before I do, what was the information you needed? Maybe I can help.
That was real nice of him, but she knew help didn't come free, or even cheap around these parts so.
Like I said, I can't pay, and I know.
He flapped his hand, bothered.
Yeah, I know. Look, I'm not from around here, and I still believe in helping people when I can. So, what did you need? You've clearly paid enough already.
There was no reason to keep it from him. It wasn't a secret, and if he could help her, fat chance, then why not?
I just needed to find some people. The ones who used to live in that boat over at the other side of the district. The bolt hole? It's not a boat, it's a ship,
he said absently, his face pensive, the neon casting a multicolored glow on his skin.
Why do you want to know? Be honest.
She sighed.
Look, it's nothing dirty or dangerous or dramatic. I just need to ask them some things. There's things I need to know. Personal stuff.
He nudged his chin at her.
Like where that red eye comes from. And I assume the fangs that go with it?
Fucking hell, did everyone immediately catch on to what she was? And there she was thinking she played it so cool. She put the sunglasses back on and said,
If you must know, yes. That's what I want to find out. I was in a serious accident and I can't remember what happened to me. And I just need to know.
He looked at the mahjong parlor, then back at her.
Tell you what, I need to deal with this first, but I might be able to help. Meet me at the bolt hole in an hour. Why in an hour?
He sighed impatiently.
Because I need to screen you, see if you are who you say you are. Don't worry, I'll get all your personal data from Kindly Chang. Now I really need to go. And so do you. All right. Thanks. I guess? Thank me when your story checks out, and I can tell you what you need to know.
Fair enough. This had been a very strange series of events, but after feeling like she'd hit a dead end, in more ways than one, there was at least a tiny sliver of hope. It could still go wrong in many, many ways, some more frightening than others, but in an hour she'd know more. It was possible that this guy was a killer, or a predator, or that he'd decide she needed to be done away with to protect some crazy secret, or it could simply be that he decided not to help her, but somehow she thought something useful would come from this. The bolt hole in an hour. It gave her time to scout for a possible meal. The beating hadn't helped her sense of disconnection, and her body felt more and more numb as the night went on, except for the pain of the beating, of course, that still hurt in complete and unforgiving clarity. The bruise between her legs tomorrow would be painful just to look at. Philip would probably have to wait for his love-making, provided of course she survived long enough to reunite with him. That night at Sang HQ felt like ages ago. Who to choose for feeding? The old conundrum still remained. Good people didn't deserve it, and bad people would just infect more good people. She could just stalk someone, pounce on them, give them a good scare and drink her fill, but that would just spread her infection. She couldn't kill them after infecting them either, because it wasn't their fault that they'd been chosen. Hell, by that logic she'd have to kill herself too, and well, fuck that. That solution was only for the most dire circumstances, if she was unable to feed and could no longer avoid turning into an insane monster. That better not happen. So killing after feeding was out of the question, but perhaps.
Hey, excuse me?
She asked two older men who were engaged in a board game. One of them, a gentleman with a long goatee, harumphed and grunted.
More English. More trouble. No, I just need to know if there's a clinic nearby. You know, medical facility? This is Hayway, dear.
The other man said gently.
The only clinics here are semi-legal cyber shop. Do you need medical assistance?
He gestured at his own face, his finger making a circle on his cheek.
Oh no, that's just a flesh wound. I'm, just looking for someone. No field hospitals either? There is a temporary medical emergency facility set up by the government after the walled city disaster.
The man with the goatee said roughly, pointing to her right, his attention still on the board.
You'll find it at the edge of the quarantine zone. And no, we do not know what transpired there, so don't bother asking. Now, please, leave us to our game.
With a friendly smile, the other man apologized.
Interruptions of our game of Go have been a nightly occurrence lately. It can wear on a man's patience.
Kate had half a mind to say that interruptions were to be expected when you played a game in public, but thought better of it.
All right, I'll let you play. Thanks a lot, and sorry to disturb you. That's quite all right.
Emergency medical facility. That would work. Apparently, the business that had gone down in the walled city had caused enough civilian casualties to make government relief necessary. Maybe she'd find what she was looking for there. The most guilt-free way to keep herself from turning into a mindless killing machine. It wasn't far to the quarantine zone. It had been instated to form a wide perimeter around the walled city, and had swallowed quite a few streets that weren't even part of the place. Armed guards, both government and wearing Tang colors, stood guarding the perimeter at fixed points, and patrolled the line to stop anyone from getting in. Big signs were posted, forbidding entrance in several languages and warning for extreme danger, severe health and safety risks. Below was a friendly reminder that officers will fire without warning. She had no intention or desire to enter the walled city right now. It was too dangerous, since she was still very much SF in the eyes of Tang unless things had changed without her knowing. But she'd be daft to take that risk. No, her business lay elsewhere. The big temporary medical building was easy to spot. The government, when necessary, rolled out a massive truck to disaster sites, a vehicle that could deploy as an almost instantaneously usable field hospital, by expanding and unfolding its loading area to form a building with multiple rooms, wards, and even operating theaters. The machine was a marvel of engineering, turning from truck into a multifunctional facility in 2 hours. It had deployed onto a vacant dock. There it was now, a large barrack, a sign above its entrance identifying it as Hong Kong Emergency Medical Hospital. There were no guards posted, just 2 doctors smoking a cigarette. Her plan was simply to walk on in, and she thought she had a good chance of actually succeeding.
"Hi,"
she said to the smoking medics, wearing her most harmless smile. Her bruised area still hurt when she walked, but it was tolerable.
"I'm looking for a friend who got injured in the walled city OG. Happenings. Can I go in?" "Sure."
One of the doctors muttered with a shrug, taking a drag from his cigarette.
"Hospital's not quarantined. Public place it. Just don't get in the way." "I won't. Thanks."
It was amazing how big the place was. Not a full-sized hospital, obviously, but definitely the size of a basketball court in all. Most of the hospital was taken up by the convalescence area, a large medical ward where people lay to recover from surgery, guarded by 2 bored-looking government soldiers. Some people in the beds were intubated and hooked up to a battery of expensive equipment. Others lay in a simple bed, sleeping or reading their PDAs or books. There was very little noise, apart from the nurses quietly making their rounds, and the occasional visitor quietly talking to a patient. No groans or cries of pain, no desperate dying moans. The morphine probably flowed liberally here. Kate truly hoped all of these people would see it through the night, and the ones after that. Most would, and those weren't the ones she needed, sadly. She steered clear of the operating theater too many people, and made for her destination, the place where she had to perform her sad duty. A nurse walked by her, smiling and nodding. Kate returned the quiet greeting. Every hospital had one. They were never called by that name, usually euphemized to relief treatment or palliative care, but they were the holes people were left in to die. The ones beyond treatment, but who couldn't be euthanized, who just lay there, waiting until they succumbed to the injury or disease that had already claimed their lives and simply took its time to collect. They were kept out of sight in a cynical but necessary measure to keep morale among the patients from plummeting, a serious danger for injured or sick people. These few had to die in isolation to help the others live. Morbid, but it got results. That was meta-humanity for you. A single soldier guarded the door.
"Evening, ma'am. Your business?"
Her disarming smile was out of place here, and Kate put on her sad face.
"I'm here to pay my last respects."
He took a clipboard.
"Patient name?"
Shit, that was unexpected. Thinking fast, she said.
"I don't know. It was someone who dragged me out of there when I was unconscious." She pointed at the freshly sutured wound on her face and hoped he'd be fooled. "I don't know who it was, but I could recognize him if I saw him. I was told he was in this hospital, but I didn't see him in the ward, and the oar isn't being used, so—"
She made her voice trail off and hoped not mentioning the implications made them more serious. She felt a bit guilty at her whole theatrics, but it was for a good cause.
"I see,"
the soldier said, scanning his clipboard.
"We have 3 patients. I shouldn't do this, but you can go and take a look, just be respectful and don't cause any trouble."
She shook her head.
"Of course not. I swear."
He nodded.
"All right."
It was a heartbreaking truth that no one would care what trouble she did or did not cause. These people were only minimally attended, kept here only to die as painlessly as possible. The first one would do fine. She wouldn't find a better candidate. It was an old man, a blood-soaked bandage over his eyes, his face patched up behind the bandages. He lay motionless, his mouth open, breathing only slowly and weakly. The heart rate monitor began beeping more quickly when she entered.
Is someone there?
He spoke in a cultured British accent.
Shh,
Kate said quietly, holding back tears. It was heart-wrenching, but it was the best way, no matter how much pain it caused her.
It's all right.
It wasn't all right. The emotional aspect of the transfer was required. She'd have to terrify him. This poor old man who just lay there, blinded and waiting to die. And she'd have to cause such horrible fear in him that his last moments would be blind and terrified. She couldn't. Not like this. This was a mistake. No good deed could be worth this. She'd find another one. This had been a terrible mistake.
Lynnie, my darling, is that you?
Kate could only rasp. His hands weakly felt around him.
Oh, Lynnie, I knew you'd come. I knew you'd come and see me before. They said you died, that you were in the house when it collapsed, but I knew.
The man breathed, his speech slurred from the heavy medication.
I've always known. My grandfather knows.
Kate screwed her eyes shut and did the only thing she could do.
It's me. Shh, I'm here.
She let her fingers touch his, her heart unable to decide if what she was doing was right.
I knew.
He repeated.
I knew you'd come. They said I won't make it. The explosion, the shrapnel. They can't remove it. Some of it. In my brain. But you live. That's all that matters.
Kate fought back tears and held the old man's hand. Was she doing the right thing? This man was dying, and all he wanted was to believe that his daughter was still alive. He would die relieved and happy, even if it was all a lie. She realized that what she was doing was both kind and disgusting at the same time, and she hated herself, even as she realized it was the merciful thing to do.
My sweet Lynnie, I'll go too. The great unknown happy man, and I will always love you.
Squeezing the tears out of her eyelids, she rose and bent over the old man's body. His arms searched for her and found her, wrapping around her in a feeble embrace. She knew the medication and injuries would make it impossible for him to realize she wasn't his granddaughter. But she remembered the words said in the self-help group. Extreme love was also a powerful catalyst for essence transfer. This man no longer needed what she was about to take from him, not where he was going, and the infection she'd pass on to him would die with him. There were many powerful emotions to take advantage of to feed, and if she had to do this, then perhaps the best she could do was let that feeling be one of intense love. They embraced, the dying man's breath choking with emotion. He didn't even feel Kate's fangs sink in, and she did all she could to make the moment as genuine for him as possible. Her body slowly reconnected with her again, her senses and sensations completely hers again, at least for a while. Slowly, she faded from his embrace, still feeling the duality of kindness and dirty lies as she looked at the old man's smiling face.
I'm ready to go now,
he said quietly, his broken face in blessed tranquility.
Help me. I want to rest.
Kate held the old man's hand as she turned the dial up, increasing the pain medication, slowly sending him to sleep, and from there, to the end of all fear, pain and suffering. She left the hospital, proud of herself and revolted by herself at the same time. End of chapter.